What if I told you that Lewis Hamilton's biggest enemy this year is not Red Bull, not McLaren, not even the FIA, but his own Ferrari team? It all started on a Friday afternoon at the Interlagos circuit, during the sprint qualifying for the 2025 Brazilian Grand Prix. A session that, for many teams, should have served as intense preparation and strategic rehearsal before Saturday's short race, became for Ferrari the stage where its most serious shortcomings were revealed. What should have been a simple day of adaptation ended up exploding as the perfect reflection of the internal chaos that the Scuderia is going through. The focus, as usual, was on Lewis Hamilton, who had yet to find a single tangible reward since he began his adventure dressed in red. The classification was entering its most critical phase. SQ2, the second round of the session, separates the mid-table teams from those that aspire to fight at the top. Hamilton, of course, needed a good final lap to get into the top 10 and move on to SQ3. He had been pushing hard with a solid pace, after several accumulated laps where his team had worked against the clock to improve an SF25 that throughout the weekend had been nervous, inconsistent, and far from optimal balance. But at the worst possible moment, disaster struck. His own teammate, Charles Leclerc, who was riding ahead on the track, made a huge mistake. At the exit of turn 10, a slow corner known as Bico de Pato, Leclerc locked his wheels while braking, stepped on the dirty area on the outside while trying to accelerate, and lost control of the car. What followed was a complete spin that left his Ferrari crossed on the right side of the circuit, causing a double yellow flag in that sector. Under normal conditions, this is only a momentary annoyance for the rest of the pilots. But for Hamilton, who was just behind on his last lap, it was a definitive condemnation. The regulations are clear. If a driver crosses a double yellow flag area, he is obliged to visibly reduce his speed, even if he has not improved his time. And that was exactly what he couldn't help. The most dramatic thing is that, according to telemetry and onboard images, the double yellow light was activated literally a fraction of a second before Hamilton crossed that point. The Briton was completely focused on executing the turn at his braking point, looking for the apex of the curve, with no visual or cognitive margin to notice the signal until it was too late. He suddenly found Leclerc's Ferrari stopped, had to lift his foot, and his lap was completely ruined. But the drama didn't end there. Upon crossing the finish line, Hamilton did so out of time. The checkered flag had already fallen. Not only did he lose the round he had started, but he would not have another chance. I was out of SQ3. Eliminated in 11th position, while his teammate, the author of the error, had calmly moved on to the next round with the time he had recorded before his spin. The atmosphere in the Ferrari garage was tense, but Hamilton's response was even more so. Upon receiving the information by radio from his engineer, Riccardo Adami, P11 in box, the Briton responded with a dry, short, but deeply revealing phrase, "Yeah, every time, mate." In just 3 words, Hamilton expressed the accumulation of frustration that has been growing since his arrival at Ferrari. It wasn't just because of this incident. It was due to a repeated pattern of errors, lack of performance, lack of coordination. It was confirmation for him and for everyone who listened to him that what is happening at Ferrari is not an accident, but a trend. This moment encapsulates everything that is wrong with Ferrari: 2 elite drivers, a team with unlimited resources, and a car that should be fighting for victories, becoming protagonists of their own disaster. Leclerc unintentionally ruined his teammates' weekend. But the real problem is that this situation already seems to be a constant in Maranello. And instead of evolving, it deepens. Ferrari, once synonymous with precision and excellence, today seems like an organization without a clear direction. Instead of joining forces, their pilots end up getting in each other's way. And Hamilton, who left Mercedes in search of one last shot at glory, now finds himself trapped in a narrative that seems written for failure. Hamilton's elimination in the sprint classification in Brazil could have been treated as simple bad fortune, an outside driver's error that ruined a key lap. But what happened in Interlagos was only the trigger for a more uncomfortable and structural truth. What was uncovered was not an isolated incident, but the visible tip of a much deeper iceberg. A systemic breakdown within Ferrari that threatens to completely derail the Hamilton era before it even begins. When the FIA announced the investigation into Hamilton for allegedly not slowing down enough under double yellow flags, the focus shifted from the incident with Leclerc to something more technical, more delicate, and above all, more revealing. The cameras showed that the signal was activated at the last second. Hamilton's own statements were clear. He did not see it. His gaze was fixed on the apex of the curve, seeking to maximize its line. But the telemetry told another story. The sensors recorded that, although it hesitated slightly when applying the accelerator, There was no visible reduction in speed as required by the regulations. And not only that, his time in that mini-sector was his personal best. On a technical level, this combination is unsustainable in the eyes of the commissioners. Fortunately for him, the final decision was a reprimand and not a 5-position penalty. But the real message was not in the sanction, but in what it revealed about the atmosphere within the team. When a pilot of his experience is exposed to this type of situation, it is generally because the internal variables are out of control. It's not just about what you see or don't see on the track. It is a reflection of an environment where coordination between pilot, engineer, and box has eroded. At Ferrari today, that seems to be completely out of whack. Hamilton made this clear in his subsequent statements. With his usual candor, he described that the problem is not reduced to the bad luck of a yellow flag. He went further. He said unambiguously that they simply weren't fast enough. Not because they didn't try, but because the reality of the car was very far from the team's expectations. And that, in Formula One, is the worst combination, believing that you have rhythm and discovering on the track that you don't. This gap between perception and reality speaks directly to a failure in Ferrari's work system. Engineers, based on simulation data and a single pre-sprint practice, projected a level of performance that the SF25 could not sustain. This disconnect is critical because it fuels poor configuration, strategy, and execution decisions. The simulation told them they were competitive. The stopwatch, without mercy, said something else. When Hamilton declared in Brazil that he only had to have fun from wherever he is, he was not using a cliché. He was giving up, symbolically, the narrative that has defined his career for more than a decade. What was once a methodical plan toward victory is now a resigned acceptance of circumstantial mediocrity. That mental transformation does not happen on a whim. It is the direct result of 21 consecutive weekends where performance has been well below its standards, without a single podium in full races, without full confidence in the car, and with an environment that has proven to be unstable. Therefore, talking about fun is an elegant way to protect yourself, to put an emotional barrier between ambition and reality. But we all know that Hamilton is not in Formula One to have fun. He's there to win, to leave a mark, to build a final narrative that lives up to its legend. And if Ferrari does not manage to transform quickly, it runs the risk of being remembered not as the peak of his career, but as the stage that stole the opportunity to close his story as he wanted. The story we are seeing unfold at Ferrari is not a simple results narrative. It's a warning. A brutal demonstration of how even the greatest can become trapped in structures that are not ready to evolve with them. The case of Lewis Hamilton is not just that of a driver who cannot adapt. It is that of a system that has not learned to adapt to its pilot. And that, in modern Formula One, is a sentence of mediocrity. The problem is not that Hamilton is in 11th place. The problem is that he is there for reasons he cannot control. When a world champion has to justify his frustration with phrases like, "just have fun," the sport is witnessing something much deeper than a bad streak. We are seeing the total disconnection between talent and structure, between ambition and execution, between legacy and present. The real drama is not that he was eliminated in SQ2. The thing is that this elimination has become routine. A reflection of what Ferrari is today, a team full of history but without clear direction. A place where cutting-edge engineering does not translate into results, where the experience of the most successful driver of his generation is limited by strategic errors, by late decisions, by a car that is never really on point. And in the midst of everything, the question remains there, latent, without a clear answer. How much longer can Hamilton endure this situation? How much longer are you going to resist before assuming that, perhaps, your bet on Ferrari was an emotionally understandable but technically insurmountable step? Formula One does not forgive. The history of the greats is written with brave decisions, but also with context that knew how to accompany them. Today, Hamilton races against the clock not only on the track but in his career. And each race without progress, without podium, without direction, pushes him closer to a closure that no one imagined would come like this. Do you think Ferrari has the real ability to reverse this trend before it's too late? Or are we seeing the beginning of the end of Hamilton's F1 career? To what extent is the responsibility of the team and to what extent of the driver? Leave me your opinion in the comments what you think about all this.